Hello everyone and welcome to this session on There Goes the Neighborhood. And the premise of that, of course, is that this is a neighborhood. Pakistan is part of a neighborhood, and the neighborhood includes Afghanistan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, and Bhutan, I think, right? I would say. My name is Beena Sarwar. I'm a journalist, and I've been working on peace issues. I focus on media, peace, gender, and human rights. But I think that peace is kind of an underlying thing, because if you don't have peace, then you can't really move forward with what you need to do to develop our countries. And as we have seen, there's so much emphasis on military build-up, and all the resources go to that because there's this security threats and so on and so forth. So what can we do to make things better? What can we do as ordinary citizens, as people? I am part of a network which many of you here are part of also, called the South Asia Peace Action Network, or SAPAN. It's something we started in March 2021, and the idea was that all issues in this region needs to be resolved on a regional level, or we need to engage with them on a regional level. You can't just leave it to India, Pakistan, because that endangers, for one thing, it endangers people who are in Pakistan. We get called traitors for being Indian agents, and in India they get called Pakistani agents and traitors to India. So it's better if we take it from a regional level. And so I'm really delighted to have this wonderful panel of legendary, iconic people from around the region, and sadly no one from India as such, but we will make sure they are represented because we are fair-minded people, and we will play the devil's advocate for our friends in India, for our comrades in India who are fighting for, so many of them are fighting for the same things that we are all fighting for. So we have with us, we have Saiful Islam from Bangladesh, and he's a writer, and he heads the Majority World, and also I recently found out DRIC, which is a legendary photo journalism initiative in Bangladesh, started by our dear friend Shahidul Alam, who is in Lahore also for the Asma Jahangir conference, which is happening this same weekend. And Saif has recently written a book on muslin, Malmal, which is, again, a very regional thing. And so he's got a book talk also. And we have Kanak Mani Dixit, my former editor and mentor and friend for more than 30 years, who started the Himal Southasian magazine, the pioneering Himal Southasian magazine, which many of you would have heard of. Audrey Truschke, did I say your name right? Who's a historian from at Rutgers, and her focus on the history of India has led to her coming under a lot of attack, as some of you might know, because the right-wing forces, as we know, don't like history, because they want to invent history, and they don't like hearing what actually happened. So that is unfortunate, but we will continue to push the boundaries on that. And we have Ziauddin Sardar, who is joining us who has come down from England, and he is a writer and a public intellectual who's written many, many books. And I'm sure that all of you are familiar with at least to some extent, with all of their works as well. So let me start by asking you, Saif, when we talked about this panel, and you said, but what are we going to talk about, And I said, but you've done this book on Malmal, on muslin, and that's such a regional thing. And what if there was regional collaboration and cooperation on something as basic as textiles? What would that do for the region?
Thank you, Beena. Thank you for this opportunity. I started on this journey, I would say, regarding the fabric, because it came to almost a series of questions. The questions were that, we had a particular fabric which is known around the world, and which is recognized around the world before the dawn of the internet, before the dawn of the printed media. Word of mouth had traveled in the 6th century that there is such a fabric. And there were people in Rome who waited 3 years to get their orders, but they'd already paid for it.
Wow.
And when I traveled to Japan, they knew it. When I traveled to China, they knew it. When I went to Turkey, they knew about it. They knew about it in Switzerland, which actually had a muslin day where they celebrated. in that winter, which surprised the hell out of me, I must say. And they even had a Muslim day in France. So the issue became that why is it that a heritage that had become so well known around the world had disappeared from its very roots? What was the reason that something that was so well known, with different names, of course, in France it was mousseline, we had malmal, and the English as muslin. But why had it disappeared? And of course, most of us know the story about how it was recognized. And when you're recognized, it is the double-edged sword. Some say that oil is a curse. I was in Nigeria, and they said that they were quite happy before they discovered oil. The per capita income was somewhere around $700. They discovered oil, and it fell down. So in a certain sense, the colonial gaze wasn't the best gaze. And of course, we'll go into the history of exploitation and finally eradication. But when I started it, I realized that we hadn't lost a fabric at all. Yes, we had lost it, obviously. It had gone. What we had lost is a piece of our identity. I think that was the important part. So a particular product or a particular fabric represented who we were. And our attempt was to bring back that fabric only for the purposes of trying to highlight what we were capable of, not we, because we were the middlemen of the story, as we all are, but really of the artisans who were making it. So this was the journey, a journey of trying to bring back this story for the purposes of identity. And when I was doing that, I found that it was obviously something which existed in the greater India, because it had been raised to huge heights during a particular time, let's say around the 16th, 17th century under the Mughals, but then it had also fallen under the English. And therefore, there were lots of connections that I could make across India, connections that were at a personal level, where I would get enormous amount of help, because sadly, we didn't have the resources in place for it. And those connections were so fruitful, and they extended right down to the level of the small weaver in Indian pits. But on other hand, I also found that the journey remained at a personal level, that if you actually enhanced it to an institutional level, then immediately then the walls would start to come up. So between the states and the institutions, between the cotton boards, between the handloom boards of different countries, then the barriers would come up. So what we have actually got in place are personal histories, personal connections that seem to work much, much better, as we all know, than the institutional do. So I think there is a real challenge about trying to elevate that, okay? There is opportunities in making those personal collections and actually bringing that product back to life, which we have done to an extent, but there are severe challenges when it comes to the institutional level. And my feeling is that somewhere along the way, we will have to bring along a certain change in these institutions through a groundswell of public opinion. When the public wants something more than what the institutions can resist, then I think we will be able to achieve that. And to an extent, this is a product that I think is aspirational, and therefore perhaps we can aspire to the future of hope in this aspect.
Right. No, I love that. I love what you said, that it's aspirational. But I also have a question, but you don't have to answer it now, but I'm just throwing it out there for everybody, which is that, to bring about change through public opinion. But we have seen over the last years when the public opinion has come out in masses, against the Iraq war, people came out in millions, and against what's happening in Gaza and the genocide there, people have come out. And it seems to, what we say, kaan pe juni ringti, they don't seem to listen, they're like tone deaf. But that doesn't mean that we still carry on. So I do take your point. But I think you wanted to say something, Professor Zia.
Thank you, Beena. This is very, very important. Why this is important is that it was pointed out that the makhmal, the absence of makhmal was the absence of a bit of our identity, right? So what actually you're saying is that we are truncated human beings. because a very important piece of our heritage is missing. But why are we truncated human beings? Well, because we do not value our own heritage and culture. We always look towards the West. बाहर जाना ज़्यादा important है, बाहर की चीज़ ज़्यादा अच्छी है. I wrote a book called A Person of Pakistani Origins, which came out 4 or 5 years ago. And when my publisher was selling it to India, they said कि भाई हम पाकिस्तान के नाम से किताब नहीं छापेंगे. So my publisher said, okay, you can look at it and call it what you like. So they named it The Ways of Being Desi. This is published by Penguin India. The book is called The Ways of Being Desi, and in Pakistan it's called A Person of Pakistani Origin, because they also saw it in terms of identity. And the Person of Pakistani Origin actually talks about Pakistani tradition and culture and film and art and all that in a way that suggests that to be completely human, we need to be complete, bring all our bits of heritage together. And every bit of heritage we bring together, we make it alive, we turn the old Lahore into a living, dynamic city like Fez, that makes us whole. But to do that, we have to stop in the West. And the only problem here is that while individuals continue to work, and I know these 3 people have been working on peace in India and Pakistan 30 years, and we still don't have any peace, is that we cannot ignore what is happening elsewhere in the world. We are a region, but we are a region that is connected, interdependent with the rest of the world. And something profound is happening in the rest of the world, which we need to think about. And it's been happening for quite some time, right? Is that power is shifting from the West to China, Turkey, Indonesia, Russia. There is a clear balance of shift of power. That the old notion of culture only coming from the West to the East is now not, so many cultures going from there, whether it's Korean film or Chinese film or Pakistani films or Pakistani dramas and what have you, the demise of Bollywood, old-fashioned Bollywood, etc., etc. Then lots of changes are happening, in a sense. And this has triggered a kind of panic in the Western psychology, in the psychic, in a sense. And so all the old Western notions have come to the fore, and we have realized that, in fact, most of them were based in falsehood. I was in a debate with David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, just before he became a Prime Minister. And it was me and somebody else, and he stood up and said, well, you multicultural folks are all talking about this and that, but the only thing that really makes any difference for us is British values. Unless you accept British values, there's no, nothing, blah, blah, blah. So I stood up and said, excellent, we will accept your British values, but let us recognize what they are. Number 1, hypocrisy. Absolutely basic Western value, hypocrisy, right? Number 2, domination. In every respect, the West has been and wants to dominate everything else. And this is what's now happening. That domination is being challenged, right? But when you have that kind of challenge, you have lots of disruptions. In the previous panel, they were talking about rapture and so on and so forth. What is happening is that the basic axioms of a civilization, namely Western civilization, are actually coming crashing down. We have discovered that modernity is a facade. It's essentially a very destructive kind of force. That postmodernism turned out to be another form of imperialism. One of the titles of my book, by the way, Postmodernism and the other, the neo-imperialism of the West. And finally, out of panic, we have Trump. But the whole question is not about individual called Trump. It's about the Western society, it's about American society, it's about European society as a whole. It's not just America that is screwing the non-West, it's also United Kingdom, where I grew up, France, Germany, right, Italy. And at the same time, out of this panic emerges fascism, as has done in the past. So, 1/3 of European parliamentarians in the European Parliament belong to the fascist parties or far-right parties, right? MAGA in America, which the base that brought Trump to power is basically a far-right fascist based. The Atlantic of last week carried a major article, is it fascism? And the answer was yes. No, you don't have to read 10,000 words in Atlantic to know that. He is a fascist, full stop. Right? And this is the problem for us because we are part of the thing. So let me just give you an example. So what is happening is that we are now at the edge of chaos. Right? And when you are in a chaos, in that position, only two things can happen. When the system flips, it either collapses or it creates a new order. And the challenge for us is to help create a new order that is more humane and more just than the order that is about to collapse. So what we have to do here is to step back and learn to navigate. Now, I was in the Lahore, old Lahore, a couple of days ago with my son and daughter. And if you look at the road, it's kind of a mini chaotic system. Gaadi bhi aa rahi hai, gada gaadi bhi aa rahi hai, ghoda gaadi bhi aa rahi hai, the motorcycles are coming, cars are coming, people are coming from all directions, right? Trailers are coming, and the scooters, thousands are coming. Yeah, and everybody's coming together. Complete confusion, complete disorder, complete chaos, yet everybody manages to navigate their way out of this complex system, right? You hardly ever get an accident, even though the guy is carrying huge goods on, because they're not going at high speed. There's a thing. What we are facing, a chaotic system that is moving very fast, very dynamic, very changed. So we need to learn to navigate it. It's not just a question of standing up and shouting. We need to learn to navigate. How do we navigate Trump? How do we navigate Germany, right, in that sense? How do we navigate the current chaotic system? And then the second challenge is to create a new, more humanistic order that is based on peace and harmony and recognize. Yeah, and one of the couple of last points I want to take. If anybody had any doubt that the West is going to come to their rescue, or development comes from the West, or West is the answer, then look at Gaza. Gaza buried the West. It is our Holocaust. Just as Second World War, the killing of 6 million Jews was a Holocaust for them, Gaza is a Holocaust for Muslims, in that sense. This is where we learn that we are not seen as human beings. This is where we learn that the West is morally bankrupt. This is where we learn that West is intellectually bankrupt. This is where we learn that even though we can see with our own eyes what is going on, they are telling us that nothing like that is happening. We had the BBC Dissat, who I know by the way, talking here yesterday. The BBC is complicit in this genocide. So the point is, let us focus on the region, yes, but we cannot overlook what's happening in the global order. And then finally, we have to realize that we have to help ourselves.
Thank you for that very comprehensive. I just want to add something to what you said, when you said that the West, whatever, but I also want to point out, in the interest of fairness and for this, in the name of all my friends in the West who have come out, in all the countries. The Jewish Voice for Peace is one of the major organizations that has come out against what's happening in Gaza, and there have been, you know, it's not a Muslim issue. I think that people have come out regardless of their religion, race, ethnicity, and whatever. And when I think what you meant when you say the West, you're talking about the policymakers, the power. You're talking about the power. But I just want to make that very clear, because to my earlier point that we've had so many demonstrations against the atrocities that we've seen before, Iraq, Afghanistan, now this, and the policymakers, it does not shift, they don't shift an inch, but we still have to keeping on. But I'm going to hand it over to Audrey or to Kanak, which of you would like to go next?
About what?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. You all don't have to clap.
In solidarity.
So I'm not going to talk about the West, right? I'm going to talk about South Asia. And when I think about the region of South Asia, as a historian, I take a very long view. That's like what we do. It's part of the job. And so I think about how the region of South Asia sort of came to be and why the political lay of the land is what it is today, right? The region of South Asia is more or less geographically demarcated by sort of, you know, mountains in the north, and then plus some islands in the south. But in terms of why do we have 8 nations in South Asia? Why not 7? Why not 5? Why not 2? Why not 1? I think there's 2 key things to know. One is that this is how it's always been. South Asia has always been politically fragmented. At times, there have been thousands of different rulers in parts of South Asia, but there has never been only one. If there's a bit of hope or something we can take from that to the future, it's that South Asia has survived and thrived for much of the past several thousand years with its political fragmentation, and so there's no reason it can't do so moving forward. I think a second big reason why we see the exact political fragmentation we see in South Asia today is, of course, British colonialism. Right? They weren't the only colonial power in the region, but they were sort of the big one. And of course, partition is the kind of most visceral event that continues to define in political and arguably in other terms the nation states, particularly of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So given that lay of the land, I think about like what might we all want to see, or most of us anyways, want to see moving forward, right? And what can I bring to that conversation as a historian? So one thing that seems to me critical, and this is a really hard one, is to take criticism, right? Criticism is just, even if it comes from people you don't like and quarters you don't like. You may dislike what the West, quote unquote, I don't know if that's a useful construct, has done in Gaza. But if somebody from a development group comes along and says, hey, you could be doing this farming better, here's how and why, I think you'd be well advised to listen to them. I think this can be really difficult. Who likes being criticized? Personally, I do not, and I get criticized a whole heck of a lot, right? In a nation-state world, especially in one with a lot of animosities, like South Asia, right? So I think a lot of Indians don't like Pakistanis criticizing them, and vice versa, right? And the examples could go on, but I do think all of us taking criticism better would help. A second thing that is even possibly more difficult is to look within, right? And to criticize not only from within. I want to make it clear, as somebody who has often been critical of right-wing political movements, especially in India, but in Pakistan as well, I have no problem with outsider criticism, right? And if you want to bash my nation, the United States, to my face, like, that's fine, we all doing it, it's not a problem, right? But I also think it's much harder to look within and do that, right? We just heard a lot about the faults of the West and nothing about the faults of Pakistan. Right? That's how most of us prefer to operate. And yet, how are we ever going to improve with that approach? I, of course, favor cooperation. Who would not favor cooperation among South Asian nations? And I would say my ideals on this, or what I would like to see, my ideal vision, is pretty extreme. Like, how awesome would it be if India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, that trio, were each other's largest trading partners, right? I don't know where Pakistan is on the list of India's trading partners, but I'm guessing at like the rock bottom, right? But in hard reality, the region of South Asia has a lot of advantages, especially for the next 40 years, right? You guys have a ton of natural resources here. That's not new. You have a lot of people. That's not new. But critically, your demographic cliff fall off is going to be about 40 years later than we're going to experience in much of the rest of the world. Now, you're still going to have to deal with that in a couple of generations, all right? You're going to have the cliff fall off too. Every nation is, with the exception of a few African ones, is at below replacement birth rates. That includes India. But you have decades before you get there, right? Why not use it to grow more regional cooperation? I am, of course, a fan of democracy. And I feel like that gets somewhat of a bad reputation these days, right? A lot of people are pretty cynical because democracy doesn't always work. It does not always mean that public opinion sways the day. It does not mean that nations do not commit atrocities, but have yet to see a better form of government. And so, to me, true democracy is absolutely non-negotiable. And then I think about, and this is the last thing I'll say as a historian, I think about, well, what could help with all of this, right? Like the economic arguments for South Asian regional cooperation are ironclad. There is no economic argument against this. And so it seems to me that the arguments mainly have to do with history, politics, and culture, right? That this kind of set of social conflicts that in many cases doesn't go back all that far, right? 78 years ago from partition may seem like a long time to you, but that was like last week to a historian, okay? But I think about what might help overcome, and to me, I think about the shared points of history, right? How can you understand the Indus Valley civilization, the history of Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, the Mauryan Empire, the Mughal Empire, even colonialism, right? The good, the bad parts of history, you decide which are the good, which are the bad. None of it makes sense if you are locked within nationalist boundaries, because there simply were not nation states until about 100 years ago in South Asia. Now, no one, and I say this as a historian, at least me personally, I do not want to go back to the past. Like, I study the past and I respect it, but I have no desire to turn back the clock. Like, I'm a modern woman, I look to the future. But if we can look back and see a shared history and a shared heritage, and turn that shared history into a shared heritage, I think it's all for the good.
The things you said was the importance of looking within. And I want to remind everyone that the greater jihad actually is that to conquer your own worst self and, apne nafs par kabu karna, that is the greater jihad. What you have in the name of so-called jihad is actually the lesser jihad. So that's, to reclaim that narrative. And it's also the same thing in the Buddhist thing, to be the change. That's the hardest thing, to take responsibility and not just keep blaming someone and someone else or the outside. And the other thing that you said about becoming trading partners, I think absolutely, I think that's if India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, also Nepal, Sri Lanka, and other countries in the region, this could be, so one of my mentors, Dr. Mubashir Hassan, many years ago said to me, I said, if France and Germany can be part of the EU, why can't we have a South Asia Union? And so that lays the basis for South Asia Peace Action Network, or SAPAN, which is online at southasiapeace.com, so anybody's welcome to check it out. So we do need to, and we know that's not going to happen because, like you said, what's happening now is India, Pakistan never seem to come on the same page at the same time. When we are being reasonable, they are being something different, and when they are being reasonable, we are being something different. So that hence the need to look at everything from a regional level, and hence look at it as a region. And that brings me to Kanak, who is the founder of the term South Asia as one word, which we use as one word at SAPAN, at South Asia Peace Action Network. Also, we use it as one word. And, so Kanak, and Kanak, as I mentioned before, launched the Himal Southasian, arguably the best and South Asian magazine from Kathmandu, more than 1997?
Yeah.
Kanak?
I get a bit sentimental every time I come to Lahore, mainly having to do with where South Asia has ended up. And I have to reflect this. Every time I come into Lahore, or fly over Lahore. Firstly, historically, the term Lahore is embedded into the Nepali language of a link to a South Asian past that we have almost forgotten. To come to work outside Nepal, people were used to invariably come to Lahore. From the time, not the British times, but from the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So a person who leaves the country to work outside is called LAHORE, a person going to Lahore. And even today, in the Nepali lexicon, Nepali language, Lahore is somebody who leaves the country. You may go to Qatar or Malaysia, but you're still in Lahore. That is one link between Kathmandu and Lahore. So that was the South Asia of a past. If you fly over Lahore at night, over Pakistan, on the way to Kathmandu, just after Lahore, 30 kilometers away, I think it is, you see a lovely light on the ground. And if you are on the right side of the plane, you see it go into the Thar Desert. It's a lovely lit up necklace, but that indicates the hard reality of what partition did to South Asia. It looks pretty, but is not. This morning, coming in from Qatar into Lahore, because there is no direct flight between Kathmandu and Pakistan anymore, something that's got to be revived.
Yep.
On the display screen, as Lahore came towards us, you could see the cities pinpointed by the generated map. So you got Sialkot, Gujranwala, Sialkot, Lahore, Amritsar, Hoshiarpur, and in between there, Jammu, and there is no border there. That's the South Asia we can't have, but that's the kind of South Asia we would like to look towards for the reasons that Audrey mentioned earlier. One is history. We don't want to go back to history, but history gives us so much in the form of present-day identity, even amidst our divided selves, that we cannot have cultural identity without a knowledge of history. And then economics. Economic linkages is what will provide the base for South Asian reality. So on both points, I'll make quick comments. One is on historical reality. The Gandhar area of South Asia is Pakistan and Afghanistan. Within Pakistan, the repository for all of South Asia, for the world of Gandhar statuary, is the Lahore Museum. But the neglect of the Lahore Museum tells me where Pakistan has arrived in the present day. If you know that in April 2012, the Mona Lisa, if you will, quote unquote, of the Lahore Museum collection, the starving Buddha, was dropped by the caretakers when they were taking the Buddha out for a documentary film shooting, and they broke this finger, this bone, and one here. And they put it together with epoxy glue. I don't know what the state is now, but even the fact that most of my Pakistani friends don't know what happened to the starving Buddha in April 2012 tells me how the Gandharan civilization does not resonate, and hence history does not resonate, because we got a new nation state. Likewise, 2.5 hours from here, there is Harappa. And again, I realize, and this is a criticism of whatever led Pakistan and Lahore to be where they are now. Likewise, in Delhi, in Kathmandu, in Dhaka, we're being made to forget so much of what makes us what we are today. Then to the economics of it all. How is it that South Asia has not come together? One is we have forgotten our history, or we have nationalized our history. More importantly, we have ultra-nationalized our history. There's a book titled The Indus Man. I will not even go into what the book contains. But economics is what should help us come back to where we were. Again, as Audrey said, economic linkages, because the South Asia is the least integrated region in the world. And what that means is South Asia becomes poorer for there not being economies of scale, for there not being efficiency in the way we produce and consume. And in particular, we must make a distinction between North and South Asia. North-South Asia, from Balochistan to Arakan, including Nepal, Bihar, UP, Punjab, Sindh, we are the problem child of South Asia. And we shoot ourselves on the foot every time we do not trade across borders. But then the nation states are now coagulated with ultranationalism, but now ultranationalism laced with faith, religion. And that's why that continues. So the only way to break it is economics. There was one opportunity 15 years ago. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister in India. I forget who was the Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif perhaps.
Nawaz Sharif, yeah.
There was the possibility of the Iran-Pakistan-India gas pipeline. Had that happened, there would be forward and backward linkages that linked the economies of India and Pakistan, so that when the first terrorist event happened, there would be enough wherewithal within these societies to move on. Right now, what happens, you work for 5 years, 8 years to do, behind the scenes negotiation, track 2, track 4, whatever. And one blast, and that's destroyed, and you wait another 10 years. So I would just end by saying that when we say South Asia, we're talking about a fourth of the world's population. We're talking about 1.2 plus billion people. So we must think for individuals. We're not talking about Greenland, a huge territory with a few thousand people. We're talking about South Asia. India has the largest population, Pakistan as a country with the 5th largest population in the world. What excruciating situation we've placed our people in. Forget the history and forget economic interaction to improve themselves. So the way to move ahead, and I'll come to this another time if there is if our Madam Moderator gives me time, how to get out of this morass is something that we all need to talk about. What Saiful Bhai said, a groundswell.
Yeah.
Yes, we need a groundswell. 1.2 billion people need to know we're being cheated, but how to bring about that groundswell is what we should talk about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kanak. So I just want to pick up on one point that you said, which also Audrey had made, which I really like, which I'm going to put it in the words of Eric Rahim, who's one of our foremost economists who passed away a couple of years ago, who said, we look back to look forward. We have to look back to look forward. So I think that's a really important point. That's one thing. And another thing I was reminded of, Kanak, I don't know how many of you have heard this term. I heard it for the first time from you, penumbra. So what we need is a South Asian penumbra, which is not like the hard, like this black and white sort of situation, but it's the grays, it's the soft shadows of the moon. And, when Pakistan had the floods in 2010, I remember that Kerala, the Chief Minister of Kerala, the Kerala government approved aid to Pakistan, And I remember, Kanak, you saying to me at that time that, the states should be able, why should it have to be center to center? Why can't Kerala talk to Punjab? Why can't Bengal talk to Balochistan? Sort of why does it have to be through the center? So those are ideas, I think, to throw out as well.
Beena, just a sentence, okay?
Yeah.
When Pathan Khan died,
Yeah.
If Pathan Khan, God forbid, had died before 1947, it would have resonated from Dhaka to Bangalore.
Yeah.
When he did die, sadly, the grief stopped at the border.
Yeah. Saif, would you like to?
Well, I think some of the questions that were raised, or rather the issues raised, I loved, Audrey, when you said about the history, of this particular part of the world. And I just remember, again, Ziauddin was talking about it, going to old Lahore. I had myself a half a day over there. What I was struck with at the end of the half a day were the layers that had coexisted. Because when you travel around old Lahore, you can see the Sikh religion, you can see the Christian religion, you can see the Muslim religion, and they're all layered over each other. So in a sense, here it encapsulates in a perfect way how history was layered upon each other, and it still exists till today. I would like to therefore step back and think about Bangladesh itself. I know that we're not having a direct representative from India, but I think that would have been vital actually to the discussion, because that otherwise will remain to be an elephant in the room unless we bring that into the conversation, because we must have a dose of real politics over here. To my mind, sometimes I've felt that Bangladesh, when we talk about a vision of the future, if we talk about what it could be, there were possibilities in Bangladesh about it. And the reason because I believe that is because with Pakistan, Bangladesh has often shared a similar set of beliefs, a similar set of rituals, religion has come into the play, and there's a vast majority of people over there who can actually have a degree of affinity in that set of beliefs. On the other hand, with our neighbor in India, we've always shared a certain similarity of cultural norms, of language, of literature, of theater, of drama. So I think in a way Bangladesh represented what you are looking for as a syncretic, secular state, which could accommodate the two together, the two almost at some time, which are so drastically opposite. And therefore, at this particular point of time, if we are going to be trying to lower the barriers, trying to actually reach a state where we can coexist within this set of beliefs, within this culture, within this history, and within our particular condition over here, we will have to obviously discard the lessons of colonialism, who actually have taught us much better, and we are practicing divide and rule much better than they did it. That's why. So we are going ahead with that divide and rule lessons, and we haven't shed that off. So it is important, I think, that we reach a degree of compromise on these, okay? And we try and make these set of beliefs, set of conditions, internalize them rather than to externalize them, not fall victim to this state that is happening over here. Now, there is obviously a danger, going forward, that these will continue to be in effect, because that is, as we heard from the earlier panel over here, that is somehow the trend in the world today. Ultranationalism is the trend in the world today. It brings success to the to parties that are actually waving the flag. It seems to actually perhaps digress from the real issues, and this has become a very convenient badge. That is it. So for us, whether it is the LLF, whether it is the Jaipur Lit Fest, whether it is the Dhaka Lit Fest, whatever it is, for us on panels and in audiences, it is important that we address those issues that matter. We address the issues that are actually making us stay away from each other, whether it is the history of Bangladesh and Pakistan and what happened in the 70s, whether it is the history of India and Bangladesh and what happened over the last 15 years. We have to address those issues, even if the state does not, and even if the state is trying to exploit it, we will have to address it and to make sure that they are resolved to an extent and they are finding some sort of critical resolution. That I would suggest is perhaps a way forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Saif, for those comments. Would anybody else like to respond to each other's before we?
Yeah, while I totally agree with you, the 2 or 3 points, I think the real politic is that we live in a nation-state situation. So they are not going away, right? Nation-states are not going away, so we have to deal with it. And
They're not going away yet.
Sorry?
Nation states aren't going away yet.
Historians find.
I happen to be a futurist, so I can look at and analyze the trends and see. But anyway, the nations, we've been saying this for 50 years, that nation states are going away. They're not going away. But what's happening is systems are collapsing. Anyway, and we have to realize that India has gone neo-fascist. BJP is a fascist party. That has never happened in our history. This is a new phenomenon, despite whatever Audrey may have said. We have a totally new phenomenon, and we have to deal with it. This is real politics. How do you deal? How do you kind of negotiate with a fascist state? I mean, that actually sees us as the other. I totally disagree with you when you said that the Muslim issue is not important. The Muslim issue is very important. This is why Gaza happened. Look at what is happening to the Muslims in India, right? It's a program after program. Part of our identity is that we are Muslims. And if you look at what the Israelis were saying about the Palestinians, is very specifically targeted as a very kind of nasty form of Islamophobia that dehumanizes it, right? So we cannot ignore that. That's real politics, right? We may talk about region, but what's happened in the Middle East affects the region. Where do the Taliban come from, right? So we have to kind of look at it. The main point I want to make is this. All this talk is lovely and wonderful, and I fully subscribe to it. We live in a complex, interconnected world. There's a law which says, it's called the law of requisite varieties. There's a law which says a complex system can only be handled or navigated by complex means. You cannot approach a complex system by just doing one thing. You have to approach it by doing multiple of things and appreciate that the system itself is moving and changing, and nation states may collapse eventually, hope. Therefore, yes, but we need to do much more in different ways, including self-criticism. And I have to admit here, Pakistanis are bloody good at self-criticism. To say that they don't criticize themselves is not quite right. I mean, almost all of my Pakistani friends are perpetually criticizing Pakistan.
True.
I mean, it's almost an art form, right, in this country, right? Perpetually criticizing our form. So we are not lacking in that, right? Yeah. What we are lacking on is a kind of inferiority complex that we have about Pakistan and the region. And that inferiority complex is a form of colonial mentality, comes vis-a-vis West. We always look at the outside. We always look towards Europe, always towards America to rescue us or to teach us. We always want to go there to learn, as though we don't have enough people to teach us here, and so on and so forth. So we need to have confidence in ourselves, in our heritage, in our culture, which is rich and vast, in our own abilities. Some of the young people I have met here are so brilliant, I'm astonished, right? And we need to trust our young people, give them confidence so they can shape a viable future for the region.
I think earlier I brought in some examples and perhaps some emotional baggage that I carry about looking at the lost opportunities of South Asia. Maybe now I briefly will list out what I think possibly could be done. Why haven't we started thinking South Asia, given that even that term is awkward to many, because India as a term is taken since 47. So India, the historical India, the Indic civilization, Hindustan is no longer available. So that's why we have to use the term South Asia and make it work, make it carry the emotional resonance that historical India would have carried. There's no other way around, because there is a nation state as of 47 with that name that carries the name and the semantics related to historical India. I think one problem that we all face, going back to the subhead, India's exclusivist turn, that's an issue because the rulers and the bureaucrats in each South Asian country have taken on the mantle of the departed colonialist. Not just in Delhi as the capital of the colonial British India, but in Colombo, in Dhaka, in Islamabad, in Kathmandu, though it was not colonized, same ideas prevail about bureaucratic political control of society, and when it's easy to use religion, such regimes use religion, and that becomes even more a lethal brew. And in that sense, I think India is learning from Pakistan. And now, to come to what's the way ahead, because if we agree that a more, not a unified South Asia, but a South Asia where the borders are softer, where trade happens. You see, I come across, as a Nepali I can, until Operation Sindoor, as they call it, I could cross Wagah into Atari into Wagah, because I hold a Nepali passport. A privilege that not easily available to an Indian or a Pakistani was available to me till last year. And when you come through, you see what should be the cacophony, as I say, of a South Asian marketplace. None of that. It is like the empty airline terminal. That's what you have at Wagah Atari, and huge warehouses, all empty, because trade is not happening. So how to make it happen? I believe the answer lies firstly in the term that nobody wants to hear, SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It should be activated for the inefficient body that it is, but something that implies the ownership of the idea of South Asia as a region by the presidents and the prime ministers and the state mechanisms. That is required. And SARC has not happened. Nepal was the chairman of the last SARC summit, 2014. Thereafter, mainly because of Mr. Modi, who is not at all keen on having Prime Minister of India, having the SARC summit in Islamabad, the next one meant to be. And so Nepal has been left holding the chairmanship since 2014. And it's very important that we not, I've heard even Pakistani friends say this, they love to have a flogging horse. Oh, SARC, it's dead. If you say SARC is dead, or if you say SARC needs, if you do not say SARC needs revival, then you're actually saying South Asia is not a term. Let's all go our own ways. Pakistan goes its ways, India, each of us. So for regionalism's sake, not as a romantic regionalism, but for really loosening the borders and having economic revival and reviving our shared histories, memories, SARC also has to be restarted. Federalism. For me, one of the problems for South Asia is we don't have South Asian scholarship as such. We have India's political scientists, Pakistan political scientists, but nowhere do you find actually people seriously studying and developing an ontology or a conceptualization of South Asia. That is the platform that has been missing. And that is something that scholars everywhere should, for their own careers, 15, 20 years down the line, when everybody decides there is a need for South Asia, whoever does the scholarship now will find that he or she will be ahead in the game 10, 15 years from now. But for now, I will end now by saying, so if India and Pakistan are not talking, what do we do? I believe there are three countries, and if not those three governments, which I don't have much hope for, at least the intelligentsia or the academics of Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka should come together to shout out for South Asia and bring academics of Pakistan and India together for conclaves.
Thank you, Kanak. Agreed, 100%. I just want to give you a little bit, just to add to what you're saying about SARC. One thing is that at the South Asia Peace Action Network, as you know, we've raised several resolutions about it, and if you go to southasiapeace.com and search for the term SARC, we've really been trying to keep that narrative alive. And you'll be happy to know that I know at least 2 PhD scholars who are studying in England right now, both young men from India, who are studying about SARC and South Asia and who are doing exactly that work. And one of them, you know, he was in Kathmandu for an internship over the past summer. So that's really good to know. And the other thing about SARC is that while the summit has not happened, there are a lot of SARC initiatives on climate change, on literature. There's a whole bunch of SARC subcommittees and stuff which are still continuing, and the work is still going on, but we don't hear about it. So that does still happen. So I'm going to hand it over to Audrey. And, we started a little bit late, and I was told by the organizers that we could run 10 minutes over because we started a little bit over, but I do want to give a chance for a few Q&A, so maybe after Audrey, then we can.
Yes, I will be brief. So I wanted to comment briefly on sort of Hindu nationalism in India, and I agree it's fascism. I think that's an accurate characterization of it. Someday it will go away, and someday is probably not all that long. And the reason historians don't predict the future much, but the reason why I think that is that fascists tend to wear themselves out pretty quickly, right? That's a general truism. Hindutva fascism does have its own elements, but it's more or less pretty similar to 20th century European fascism, right? And that's its intellectual heritage. When that happens, India hopefully will sort of come out of its right-wing turn. Now, it's possible to go the other way, but assuming that at least large parts of Indian society are ready to put that chapter behind them, Indians are going to have to deal with the aftermath, right? Because every single person in the nation state of India has already been changed by Hindutva, and they will be changed by it until the moment when it ends. This is the problem with living in a society controlled by the far right. One of many problems is that it changes us all. So there's no going backwards. There's no reviving Nehruvian secularism, whether we even wanted to do that. That's not going to be an option. And I wonder if the general idea of sort of how might we move beyond the right-wing turns of our societies, right? I think that should be something that Pakistanis probably have something to say about, right? With Bangladesh, I mean, you all are playing with fire in your upcoming election on that point, so you may well have something to say about it pretty soon, right? Not all shared connections have to start off as positive, right? It can start off with a shared experience of sort of horror and misery and yet bear fruit.
Thank you, Audrey. That's,
Can I just ask Audrey, do you think fascism just goes away on its own, or does it need to be confronted before it goes away?
I have something to say on that also, but go ahead.
Sure. I mean, historically, this has gone down a variety of different ways, and when I say it's going to go away, I don't mean nicely, right? I expect Hindu nationalism to do a lot of damage on its way out the door. I simply mean that when I think ahead in 40 years, I don't see the BJP having had control of India for 40 years.
I just want to add to that, that I think what Fahmida Riaz said after the Babri Masjid was knocked down, and she wrote that brilliant poem, Tum bilkul hum jaise nikle, you've turned out to be just like us. And so it seems like what we went through during the Zia years, India is kind of going through it now, except that we had a military dictatorship and they elected theirs. But then Hitler was also elected. Just to add to that about to your question also, it doesn't just go away, but I do see, I think there's a point, sorry, I'm the moderator, so I shouldn't be talking so much, but I do want to make this a point about social media. And I do want to point out that the rise of social media around the world the rise of right-wing authoritarianism around the world coincides with the rise of social media. They've gone like that because the filter and the editorial filter was removed, and they could go directly to the people with whatever lies or whatever half-truths or misconceptions they were putting forward. And so you have this, and you have all the, workers of the world unite, you had the disgruntled of the world unite, the fear, what you talked about earlier about fear. You talked about the fear, they're so scared. So they're scared because they can see the old order changing, and that fear is what has given rise, it's a reaction, right? And what social media has done is it has given everybody that kind of reactivism has become the thing. So we have a social media pledge, if people want to check that out, that's actually a really good tool for right now, which many of you here have. Kanak, of course, is on it as well. It's at saparnews.com/social. And the first thing in that is when you see something that you get triggered by online, that you feel outraged by, the first thing you have to do is to pause, reflect, and only share and comment on it when you have verified and you can put some context to it. Don't just share crazily and, you know, what I call lazy forwarding and all that, because it doesn't do anything except it assuages your own conscience. Yeah, we'll go to questions now. I think maybe we can take 5 minutes, if that's okay. And maybe if we can have the lights on. No, we don't have time to. So I'm sorry we don't have time for questions, although I was told that we could have. That's what I was told, but it's okay. If you can turn the lights on, then we can, and so what I tell my journalism students is that sometimes it's more important to ask the questions than to have any answers, because we may not have answers to your questions. So I would just like to give, if I could just have 1 minute, and just, like, people can just ask, maybe we could take 3 or 4 people just asking questions. If you can turn the lights on, please. Yeah.
Tarunjit Singh Bhutalia from the United States. I have traveled to Pakistan 2019, more than 20 times, stopped counting. I have not met a single Pakistani who dislikes people of India. They may not like the Indian government. However, on the same trips when I go to India, what I find is the people of India, most of them cannot make a distinction between the people of Pakistan and the government of Pakistan, because they're both evil. So my question is towards Audrey, and part of the reason is that there is a patriotism of hate that is present. To love your country, you have to hate the other. How can we get through that? Thank you.
But we're not going to answer that right now, but yeah, we just have, since the mic is there, we have, I don't know. I'll let you guys just give it to whoever you can get it to, because there's too many hands up. Sorry.
May I talk in Urdu?
जी अपना नाम बता दीजिए।
मेरा नाम हसनैन अली है और मैं गवर्नमेंट कॉलेज यूनिवर्सिटी का स्टूडेंट हूँ। और मेरा सवाल आपसे ये है कि हमारा जो कॉमन इशू है बोथ इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान, विच इज़ टेररिज्म, ठीक है, वी कैन से दैट्स टेररिज्म। तो उस हवाले से हमने बहुत सारे माहिदे भी किए, 2001 से लेके ऑनवर्ड हमने बहुत सारे इस पर बातचीत भी की, लेकिन हम एक कॉमन पॉइंट पे नहीं आ सके, कोई कॉमन एंड हम नहीं लेके आ सके। तो इसकी क्या रीज़न है? क्या पॉलिटिक्स जो है वो है, या फर्दर कोई जो आ रही है, जो अपडेट्स आ रही हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल जिस तरह हम कह देते हैं कि हिंदुत्व है, उधर हिंदुत्व कह देते हैं, इधर हम कह देते हैं कि पाकिस्तानी नेशनलिज्म, तो कॉमन ग्राउंड क्यों नहीं आ रही इस सवाल से?
Thank you. Just a couple more. You can give it to whoever you, yeah.
My name is Amir Shah, and just wanted to make the point what Kanak Dixit said about the gas pipeline, and maybe that could be a catalyst. But what I think is it in the interest of the big powers to make sure that they are local gundas like Israel in the Middle East and India here to subjugate those countries who are weaker? And unless and until we respect each other, meaning for Pakistan to respect India, Bangladesh, Nepal and Sri Lanka, unless we learn to respect each other, we can't really get into what I would call sharing of ideas and sharing of thought and sharing of power.
Thank you. I think we'll have to leave it there. I'm really sorry. I don't think we have really a chance to respond. I think we can, if that's okay with everybody. So please join me in thanking our panelists and for a very thought-provoking and insightful session. Thank you all. Thank you all for being a wonderful audience and for your patience.